There is a point in life when the days no longer seem to rush past in the same way they once did. Not because time has changed, but because our relationship with it has. After 60, many people notice that life begins to move at a different pace. Mornings arrive more gently. Evenings feel closer, more familiar. The space between things feels wider, less crowded. It is not something that happens overnight, and it is rarely dramatic enough to mark on a calendar. It simply becomes noticeable, the way a room feels different once the noise has faded. For much of life, speed feels natural. Days are full, often overflowing. One thing leads to another, and there is always something next, waiting just ahead. Moving quickly feels necessary, even responsible. Slowing down can feel like falling behind. But somewhere along the way, that urgency begins to loosen its grip. Not all at once, not as a decision. It happens quietly. A pause before standing up. A moment of sitting before starting the day. A preference for doing one thing at a time rather than many. At first, this change can feel unfamiliar. There may be a brief wondering if something is wrong, if this easing is a sign of loss. But as days pass, it becomes clear that nothing is missing. Life is still here. It is simply unfolding with fewer demands. After 60, time often feels less like something to chase and more like something to walk alongside. There is no starting line, no finish line either. Just a steady movement from one moment to the next. Many people notice that they no longer feel pulled forward in the same way. The future is still there, but it no longer presses so closely. Plans exist, but they do not crowd the present. There is more room to stay where one is. This slowing is not about doing less for the sake of it. It is about doing things differently, with fewer interruptions, with less urgency, with more attention given to what is already happening. Small moments begin to stand out, the way light enters a room, the quiet between sounds, the comfort of familiar routines. These things were always present, but they were often passed over in favor of what came next. Now, they are noticed. There is no sense of arrival in this shift, no clear moment when life announces that it has changed pace. It simply feels as though the days have settled into a rhythm that no longer asks to be rushed. And in that rhythm, many people begin to sense something unexpected. Not a loss of momentum, but a quiet relief. As if life, after many years of moving quickly, has finally given permission to slow down. Here, in this gentler pace, nothing needs to be proven. Nothing needs to be caught up to. Life continues, steady and unhurried, inviting us to move with it rather than ahead of it. As life slows down after 60, the body is often the first to notice, not in sharp or alarming ways, but through gentle signals that ask for a different rhythm. Standing up takes a moment longer. Mornings unfold more gradually. There is less desire to rush from one position to the next. These changes are easy to misinterpret at first. For many years, speed felt like strength. Efficiency felt like responsibility. Moving quickly through the day became a habit so familiar that it felt inseparable from living well. When that habit begins to soften, it can feel strange. A quiet question may arise. Why does everything seem to take longer now? Why does the body resist being hurried? But over time, another understanding emerges. The body is not slowing down out of weakness. It is slowing down because it no longer needs to prove anything. Daily routines begin to adjust on their own. Breakfast is not rushed. Tasks are spaced farther apart. There's a natural pause between activities that once ran into one another. These pauses are not empty. They are simply unfilled. In earlier years, empty time often felt uncomfortable. It invited restlessness. Now, it feels different. It feels like breathing room. There is a growing awareness of how effort feels in the body. Some movements feel easy and satisfying. Others feel heavy in ways they did not before. This awareness quietly guides choices throughout the day. What to do now? What can wait? What does not need to be done at all? This is not a conscious strategy. It is a gradual alignment between intention and energy. Walking becomes less about distance and more about motion itself. Sitting becomes less about stopping and more about arriving. Even simple actions take on a different quality when they are no longer hurried. Sleep changes as well. Nights may come earlier. Rest may arrive in shorter stretches. But there is often a deeper listening to what the body asks for. Fatigue is not pushed through as it once was. It is acknowledged, respected. With this shift, time itself begins to feel different. Hours may pass quickly, yet the day feels fuller. Not because more is done, but because less is missed. Attention lingers where it once skimmed. Meals are eaten more slowly. Sounds are noticed. Familiar spaces feel richer, more present. A room is no longer just a place to move through. It becomes somewhere to be. This slowing down also affects how the day is shaped. There is less stacking of obligations, less urgency to fill every open space. Gaps appear naturally, and they are allowed to remain. These gaps become places of quiet observation, looking out a window, sitting in the sun, watching the afternoon shift toward evening. None of this feels like wasting time. It feels like using it differently. After 60, the body often teaches what the mind spent years ignoring. That pace matters. That constant motion carries a cost. That rest is not a reward for productivity, but a part of living itself. There is no clear instruction manual for this stage of life. Each person finds their way through small adjustments, through listening, through noticing what feels right and what feels forced. Over time, the slower rhythm stops feeling like an interruption. It becomes familiar, comfortable. The day begins to arrange itself around it. What emerges is not a smaller life, but a more measured one. A life that moves at a pace the body can sustain without resistance. In this measured pace, there is often a sense of quiet agreement between the body and the day. They move together, without urgency, without argument. And in that agreement, life continues, steady and grounded, no longer asking to be rushed, and no longer needing to be. As the body settles into a slower rhythm, the mind often follows in its own way. After 60, attention begins to move differently. It no longer jumps as quickly from one thing to the next. It lingers. It stays longer with a thought, a moment, or a simple task. For much of life, the mind is trained to keep up. There is always something to remember, something to anticipate, something to respond to. Thoughts overlap.
Plans stack. The future presses in from all sides. Over time, that mental crowding eases. It does not happen because there is nothing left to think about. It happens because fewer things ask to be carried at once. Obligations thin out. Expectations soften. The mind no longer needs to divide itself so finely. After 60, many people notice that they can focus on one thing without feeling pulled away. Reading a few pages without checking the time,
Listening to a conversation without preparing the next response. Sitting quietly without feeling the need to justify it. This shift can feel unfamiliar at first. The quieter mind may seem empty compared to its earlier pace. But slowly, it becomes clear that it is not empty at all. It is simply less crowded. Thoughts arrive one at a time. They stay long enough to be noticed, then move on without being chased. There is less mental commentary, fewer internal arguments, less replaying of what has already passed. The slowing of the mind brings a different quality to everyday life. Activities feel less fragmented. Moments feel more complete. A single task can fill the space it occupies without needing to be followed by another. There is also a change in how worries appear. They do not disappear, but they lose some of their urgency. Concerns are still present, but they no longer demand immediate resolution. They can wait. Often, they fade on their own. This does not mean becoming careless. It means becoming selective. The mind learns what deserves attention and what does not. Not through effort, but through experience. After many years, certain patterns become familiar. The same worries return and leave. The same thoughts circle and pass. Recognizing these patterns brings a quiet confidence. Not everything needs to be solved today. There is also more space for noticing what is happening right now. The texture of the moment, the sound in the room, the feeling of sitting still. These small details no longer compete with mental noise. They are allowed to take their place. Conversation changes as well. Words come more slowly, but they carry more weight. There is less pressure to be quick or clever. Silence becomes part of the exchange, rather than a gap to be filled. With fewer demands on attention, the present moment grows larger. It stretches. It becomes something that can be entered fully, rather than passed through. Life after 60 often feels clearer in this way, not because everything is understood, but because fewer things compete for understanding. The mind rests where it is, instead of reaching ahead. This resting does not feel like withdrawal. It feels like arrival. The slowing of thought brings with it a gentle steadiness, a sense that the mind no longer needs to chase every possibility. It can stay with what is real, what is nearby, what is already here. In this quieter mental space, life feels less scattered, more gathered. The day unfolds without constant commentary, allowing experience to speak for itself. And in that unfolding, many people find a new kind of clarity, one that comes not from thinking more, but from thinking less, and noticing more. As life continues to slow after 60, a different understanding begins to take shape. Not an idea that arrives suddenly, but a feeling that settles over time. The sense that this change in pace is not something to resist and not something to fix. For many years, speed was tied to meaning. Being busy meant being needed.
Moving quickly meant staying relevant. Time was something to manage, to control, to stay ahead of. Slowing down, by contrast, often felt like falling behind. Later in life, that connection quietly loosens. There is a growing awareness that much of the rushing belonged to a different season. A season of building, proving, responding. That season had its own logic, its own demands. But it does not last forever. After 60, the demands soften. Not all at once and not completely, but enough to be noticed. Enough to change how time is experienced.
The slowing of life begins to feel less like a loss and more like a shift in orientation. Time is no longer something pushing from behind. It becomes something that moves alongside. There's less pressure to get ahead of it. This changes how days are lived. Moments are no longer evaluated by how productive they are. They are felt for what they are. A walk is not judged by distance. A conversation is not judged by outcome. Sitting quietly is not judged at all. There is a subtle relief in this, a sense of being released from constant measurement. Life no longer needs to justify itself through activity. This does not mean that purpose disappears. It becomes quieter, less visible, more internal. Purpose begins to feel like alignment rather than achievement. There is also a deeper appreciation for repetition. The same routines, the same places, the same small gestures that make up the day. What once felt dull now feels reliable, comforting, steady. After many years of change, sameness begins to feel like a gift. The slowing of life after 60 allows experiences to deepen rather than multiply. Fewer things happen, but each one is felt more fully. Attention stays longer. Memory holds differently. This depth is not dramatic. It does not announce itself as wisdom. It simply feels natural, as though life has shifted into a mode that suits it better now. There is also an increased tolerance for incompleteness. Not everything needs to be resolved. Not every thought needs an answer. Loose ends are allowed to remain loose. Time feels more spacious because fewer things are being pulled through it. In this space, people often discover that presence matters more than progress. Being with a moment carries more weight than moving past it. This realization does not arrive as a conclusion. It arrives as a quiet preference. The world outside continues to move quickly. That does not change. But the inner pace no longer tries to match it. There is less comparison, less urgency to keep up. After 60, life slows down not because there is less to live for, but because there is less need to rush through what is already here. The days begin to feel like something to inhabit rather than navigate. Time becomes a place rather than a pressure. And within that place, many people find an unexpected steadiness, a calm that does not depend on circumstances, a rhythm that feels sustainable. This is not a lesson to be learned. It is simply a way of living that reveals itself when speed is no longer required. As life settles into this slower pace, there is often a quiet easing that happens without being noticed. The day no longer feels like something to get through, it feels like something to move within. After 60, time seems less insistent. Hours pass, but they do not push. Moments arrive, and they are allowed to stay as long as they need to. There is less effort spent arranging the day, and more ease in simply letting it unfold. Many people find that evenings carry a different quality now. Not heavier, just softer.
The transition from day to night feels natural, unhurried. There is no sense of having missed something important by slowing down. Nothing feels left behind. In this quieter rhythm, life does not become smaller, it becomes closer. Everyday moments feel more immediate, more complete. A chair by the window, a familiar walk, a simple meal.
These things no longer feel like pauses between more important events. They feel like life itself. There is no need to label this change, no need to decide whether it is good or bad. It simply is. A different way of moving through the same world. Some days are fuller than others. Some pass gently without leaving much behind. Both are welcome. Neither demands explanation. The slowing of life after 60 does not ask for acceptance or resistance. It does not require agreement. It continues quietly, regardless of how it is named. In this space, there is often a sense of being in step with time rather than ahead of it. The need to hurry fades. The need to arrive fades as well. What remains is a steady presence, moving at a pace that feels livable. There is comfort in knowing that nothing needs to be rushed now, that days can open and close without urgency, That life does not require constant movement to remain meaningful. As the light shifts and the day comes to rest, there is a feeling of things settling where they belong. Not perfectly, just comfortably. Life continues, not faster or slower, but more in tune with itself. And in that tuning, there is room. Room to breathe. Room to notice. Room to let time move at its own pace, carrying us gently along.